Welcome to another episode of the Grow Your Occupancy podcast. I'm Julie Podewitz, CEO and founder. This episode of the Grow Your Occupancy podcast is sponsored by Model 55. Model 55 provides turnkey model apartment and design solutions for senior living communities, combining quick nationwide service with deep expertise in creating model apartments. Model 55's designs are more than just aesthetically pleasing. They are strategically designed to drive occupancy and sales. From custom designs to ready-to-ship kits, Model 55 has solutions for any budget. For more information, www.model55.com. That's model55.com. Today, I welcome two of my favorites, Brandon Christiansen, Jessi Weldon of Primrose Senior Living. Welcome.
Hi.
Thanks, Julie. Happy
So
to be
good to
here.
have both of you. So, Brandon, you are what is your title?
Director of Marketing.
You're the Director of Marketing. Jessi, you're the Executive Vice President of Sales Marketing.
Yes. Yep. Of Sales and Marketing.
Great, great. Good. And, I appreciate both of you jumping on. You have topped my wish list of guests. And the reason is, well, we've worked together in several capacities. And Jessi, you and I first met a long time ago.
2012. Been a while.
They say time flies, and it kind of does. But then you think that's 12 years, feels like a long time, doesn't it?
It does, but then I can still remember even the session. So it's wild how that happens and people stick with you. So I'm glad we were able to connect more over the years.
Me too. And you've grown in your role at Primrose. How long have you been with the company?
In total, almost 19 years, but always in sales positions. I started as a sales director in one of our communities and then have stayed on that path from regional to director and now the EVP role.
Well, congrats. Primrose has a legacy, really stability and leadership and commitment. I mean, I know the senior leadership is so committed to its people, and it really permeates, and the results there are great. And I'm really excited too, because your president's going to be a guest on a future podcast. So stay tuned, listeners, for more Primrose. And Brandon, you recently celebrated an anniversary with the company, right?
10 years. I've been with Primrose for 10 years. So again, goes to your statement that, Primrose has a lot of longevity and really supports its people to be able to allow for such longevity out of some of our team members here. So it's great to have that.
It is. You and I first met a couple of years, 2 or 3 years ago at a conference. I think it might be 3, Brandon. Yeah, that was the first time. Has it been 3?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. First time I met the two of you as a team. And we've talked a lot on the podcast of how important sales and marketing, of course, both are. And they're two different disciplines, sales and marketing, and how important they are both to the company and results and outcomes, and how important it is to align, what is done in sales or what's done in marketing. And I appreciate the two of you, how you work together, and both how each one of you work in your expert discipline, and then how you work together. Jessi, you said something to me recently. You said Brandon pulls data together that tells a story, and that you said you use that data or that story to influence behavior. That is pretty powerful, and that stuck with me. So Brandon, I want to start with you. So I first of all, I got to tell you that you are, if not you are definitely one of the most thorough, data-focused marketing professionals I know, and you seem to really have a passion for it. Obviously, a great brain for it. But what data in all what you do you find most important to share with Jessi? I mean, in other words, what story are you trying to tell her?
Well, first off, thanks for the kind words. I don't always feel I'm as thorough as I probably need to be, so I greatly appreciate that. So when Jessi and I are working together and there's something that we want to uncover through data and have a better understanding, I think one of the first parts of that is understanding, either intuitively or having the conversation with Jessi to understand what it is that she is wanting out of the data. What story is she wanting to understand? Not what story does she want to tell, but what does she want to understand through the data? Because that's going to help drive where I need to go inside of the numbers. If it's an explanation of why did something happen, right? If we're going to look at the black box after the plane crashed into the mountain, or are we looking for something more proactive, something that we want to be able to take to understand how we can improve a situation, or what maybe even a prescriptive type of analysis with a particular market. And so I think with data and understanding what it can do in that regards, that's one of the big first pieces, is to really identify what is it that we're trying to solve or understand or prescribe around. After that, for me, I have to start at the very, very top of the data pile, without getting into a ton of KPIs and without getting into tons of spreadsheets and dashboards and slicing and dicing. I like to start at the very top of it and just understand, okay, so if this is a question of growing occupancy, for example, first culprit, right, is the pipeline sufficient, right? Like that's where we have to start that entire conversation, because it may not be a sales process that we can iron out, right? The process may be great, may be fantastic. We just have to feed it more. And so unfortunately, in some of those situations, Jessi doesn't get a lot of data back from me, because it's on me on the marketing side to be like, okay, well, we got some pipeline issues that we have to take care of first. The sales side seems to be fine. And then it's just, understanding that story that the data can tell us is really, it's the onion, right? We just have to peel layer after layer after layer without any perceived reality of what's going on, right? Like that's why I think I'm a good partner for Jessi in that regards, is I'm disconnected a lot from the sales process. I'm disconnected from the community, so I can look at that data objectively. It's really hard when I already have a preconceived problem, right? Or a preconceived solution to the problem, and I want the numbers to support me.
Yeah.
So then there's more opportunity to manipulate it in that way. So once we understand that, and once we start peeling the layers back, man, everything is on the table. There's nothing that we won't dive into or dig into. And I think that whether it's my abilities or our company's willingness to provide us with technology that supplements those, we are able to dive into some very, very minute versions of different data sets and really try to understand how those data pieces connect and what those connections are trying to tell us in those stories.
Two things. One is I wanted Jessi, it's interesting because what you're saying is, what I'm hearing you say is that it's not so much what story I want to tell, but it's what story Jessi in this case wants to read or needs to know or wants to know. And then you can then say, okay, you want to know this, that this is the data that I need to pull. So I think that's interesting that it truly is it's dual integration, right? Between, the two of you, such as one feeding the other or vice versa. And then, that confirmation bias. You think, well, isn't data? And it's very interesting because I think sometimes, in spite of, certainly with people, I think we could definitely fall into that. Like we really like somebody, or, and so we are kind of a little bit of confirmation bias. And so we see them through a different lens, like maybe behaviors or outcomes versus someone that maybe, isn't as much our cup of tea. So that's interesting that you say that, because perhaps we do the same inadvertently. We may do the same thing, like, ooh, let me see if I can, manipulate this to tell the story. So Jessi, what kind of stories do you like? What do you need to know or want to know?
I think with what Brandon talked about is I'm trying to figure out what is the check engine light thing, right? I know there's a check engine light, or the regional team knows there's a check engine light, but I have been digging under the hood. The regional team's been digging under the hood, and we can't figure out what it is. So I need this story to help me say, okay, this is likely what's causing that light to go off. And then the data to tell that story, right? Like the check engine light is saying here, it's isolated to these 3 possibilities. And then I need to take that information with the regional and figure out, okay, how do we influence the behavior change within the sales process that's going to positively impact the data behind this? So trying to tie it all in together, starting with there's so many numbers. What are they telling us? And what do I need from this data? I read a great article on this, Brandon shared with me last week, but essentially are we coaching on the data, or are we coaching on the behavior that needs to change as a result of what the data told us? And my area with my team from the sales side is really the behavioral changes. And there are times when we do involve the sales director in the data, and they can certainly see their KPIs, but it's not necessary, unless they really want to or they love it. If you've got somebody that's not necessarily, maybe they don't love numbers, they just don't thrive on that, that's okay. They don't need to know about it. The coach does.
Right.
And the coach has to coach for the behavioral changes, but they don't need to focus on where everybody else's inquiry to tour is. They need to focus on what are the 2 things that are preventing mine from getting me the number of tours I need to grow occupancy.
So I was going to ask you for a specific example. So what would be a behavior you might try to influence based on a data point? And then can you give me an example of how you would coach? That's very interesting. Coaching to the data versus coaching the behavior.
Yep, I think that's a great question. One example, outreach is one. We just reviewed somebody that they have strong professional referrals, but nobody's moving in that's being referred, or very, very low percentage. So after digging in, we learned that this individual was basically saying, refer everyone to me and then I'll take over and I'll help them, and taking it off these other people's plates essentially. But all it was doing was creating more work on her, not helping that, I'm going to call them customer, but not helping that prospect in the end run, because we're not the solution. So essentially we became a middleman and created a longer process for everybody involved. So that was one data point, and Brandon and I partnered on that one together to be able to help this individual. Now her conversion is one of the highest in the company.
Okay, so that's a great example. High professional referrals. Oh, yay, because we're all about that, right? Yay, yay. And then you look and like, wait a minute, the conversion on the professional referral should be X. It should be quite high, 50%, 30% at least, right? And yet I'm just going to make this number up, 10. That doesn't seem right. Let's go back and instead of maybe saying we need to do better outreach, because I'm all about solving the puzzle. I'm all about very much the 3 of us are very aligned in exactly what we're trying to solve for that, or what behavior we need more leads. And then you can go to Brandon and say, yeah, she's getting loads of professional referrals. Then you can go to her and ask, like as a coach, to find out why. Not why, that's not the question to her, but using that data, then you can drill down and then, oh, okay, I see what happened. So you really best understand what problem you're solving for, that's very interesting. That's very interesting. Yeah, the more minute, micro, the better able, in my opinion and experience, we are to solve for Instead of being really broad, we need more leads, or we need to do outreach, or you need to close strong, or, these kind of broad statements or broad directives really have to get down into it, and you need the data. Brandon, could, leads, like, new leads, for instance, or lead source analysis, right? So lead source analysis, where your leads are coming from. And from your perspective, it's the digital, right? Not the outreach leads, but, from a digital, from an advertising, from a marketing perspective, right? Can you give an example of how you might slice and dice that one metric?
Oh, yeah. So when we talk about just lead generation, and how that can change very quickly for us and our focus changes, especially on the digital side, right? There are so many metrics that boil into that. And one of the challenges I undertook recently, to better understand what this looks like, is a more in-depth evaluation of what marketing qualified lead means for us. So it's one thing to generate, we need 1.5x marketing qualified leads. Well, marketing qualified leads are great and wonderful, but move-ins are better. Tours are better. Deposits are better. Like any other stage of that process is better than marketing qualified leads. So generating marketing qualified leads that don't necessarily do anything because either they're not financially qualified or capable or beyond scope of care, like whatever those reasons or logics may be, at the end of the day, it's not about for us, and this is where some of that fundamental change came into, is we're not judging marketing success based on how many marketing qualified leads we get or how many impressions or clicks or anything else. Those are all great numbers. But what we're really hanging our hat on now is how many financially qualified, sales qualified leads are we able to generate? How are we able to generate enough people for salespeople to be able to work through that journey and be able to connect with them? And for that prospective resident to have enough education and confidence to have a phone call, right? We all know that it's easy to fill out a form. It's harder to have that conversation. And so that's some of the stuff that we've started diving into a little bit more is we take away the financially unqualified from our perspective to say that those aren't sales opportunities, and we need more sales opportunities, because sales opportunities turn into tours. Those turn into deposits, those turn into our residents. And so that's part of the manipulation on that. So then on the lead source side of that, we're looking instead of just what can generate the most new people into the database versus what's going to be able to provide us the most sales qualified leads, or even more effectively, like who's going to do it the cheapest, right? Because we all know budgets are not, going to blow up and be amazing anytime soon. So we have to do that in a very economical and efficient way. So then it adds more layers again on marketing to be able to say, if I can increase my conversion of my website to more marketing qualified leads, but my sales opportunities haven't increased, that's where I need to dive into the data again and figure out, where am I missing that link between those two? Is it content? Is it education? Is it interactivity with it? Is it, is something else missing, right? Like, so often we default into content has to be SEO specific, but that may not be the answer, right? If they're finding you and they're getting to your site and they're converting, if I can give them more education, maybe that's where my content needs to go to it. And so that's where some of those data points will start helping us understand that story and help then start driving that strategy to get those sales opportunities for our communities.
Yeah, and a lot of your communities are in smaller markets, right? You're smaller cities. So, and you talked about budget. It's not just all about throwing more money at it. Oh, well, we need to add, because you don't have large budgets, right? You don't spend the most, I'm guessing, in your, right?
Correct.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Our cost per acquisition is very low, especially when we look at the industries numbers that we see. And that's it's kind of a sense of pride for us too, a little bit. Sure. Is to do that and provide that opportunity for the sales directors to get as much out of these small rural markets as they possibly can, knowing that we're not going to get, I think that just amps up the pressure for us too, is, instead of seeing 30, 40, 50 new inquiries every single month, where we don't have to understand the process so granularly from marketing or sales or any other level of our communities. When that number is only 12, there's not as much margin for error on either side. We have to make sure that that marketing person is getting the right stuff, that pre-prospect and that prospect stage. And then sales has a great iron out process to be able to make that happen for them.
And because we know that prospects require more and more time spent, per prospect. And this is such an emotional decision, and there's multiple touches and relationship building and home visits and all. It's really impossible to try to work with 100 new leads every month, or 50 new leads, and your existing database. And you don't use aggregators, is that true? Paid lead aggregator?
Correct. We do use in a few markets, we use the local partners that we've been able to build a relationship with, but we do not use national aggregators. No. And never have.
And you never have. And you never have. And what about people listening to say, well, we can't do it without them because they beat us, in the search. What advice or what thoughts might you have for someone looking at it in that way? Like, we'd love to turn it off, we just can't.
So in 2 of our recent acquisitions, both happened within the last 18 months to 2 years. We had that. We've dropped significantly in lead volume in both because we do not use the national aggregators that they did before, but we haven't dropped in move-ins, and we haven't dropped in tours. So I think it's important, and I give Brandon a ton of credit for that, for one, finding the right audience for us, and then 2, from the outreach side, get in front of people who can and will refer. That is your quickest way to be successful and to help the people that need our help. So you have to invest fully in those 2 measures, I think, to really offset what those aggregators can bring. Now, I can't speak for a larger market. It may look different. I'll be the first to say I'm not an expert in the metro areas, but I certainly know it's worked for us in these markets.
I think one of the other things.
Oh, no, go ahead.
With the aggregator leads and for somebody to be nervous about losing, what can be 30, 40, 50% of your lead volume in some of those cases, is to remember that there is a rule of diminishing returns. Julie had mentioned, right? Like, how do you have time to work 100 leads and do that, and manage a database and make all the right calls and do the strategy development and stuff like that. And I think one of the neat things about when we take aggregator out is there's going to be a lift in KPI almost across the board. Inquiry to tour goes higher. Tour to deposit goes higher. Deposit to move in goes higher. These sales functions go higher because there's less volume, but the volume is the good quality volume that you want to be able to have a sales director be in front of. They're not chasing down all of these other leads, and that time can be spent on really building that relationship and connecting emotionally to those prospects, which we all know is going to drive that prospect farther down the funnel faster than anything else that we can do.
So we're heading into Q. Oh, I had one quick question before I wanted to ask you kind of what's next, or as you're looking into 2025, what you might want to accomplish. How do you said something, Brandon, about tweaking content potentially, or it's not all about SEO. Perhaps if people are getting to our site and it's about content. Can you give an example of what you mean by that? Like what kind of content, in a sense, might you add or provide based on if that's maybe one of your findings?
Absolutely. So one of the things, you kind of also mentioned what's on the horizon for 2025, and this fits into both parts. So I can grab both of these here.
Perfect.
one of the things that we have noticed in our data and our site and seeing how Google Analytics is portraying everything and all of our connection points are doing that is we're seeing a high amount of traffic. We're seeing growth in organic. We're seeing growth through paid digital and things like that. And while that growth is great, it's exceeding what we thought it was going to be in 2024. But the marketing qualified leads and the sales qualified leads haven't followed suit. And so we know we're missing something. And so one of the things that I was able to do was to start playing a little bit more with our messaging to see what people are interacting with and what people aren't necessarily interacting with. And we're going to take that concept and we're going to be able to build the story and the messaging that we want to know that, you know, this market segment is responding to this. This is what they're craving. This is what they're asking. A lot of research going into that. And then we want to be able to present that on our site. And so it's not about, yes, we still have to have the stuff on the site that everybody has, right? The boilerplate, this is who we are, this is what we do, these are our floor plans, right? All of that kind of fun stuff, but also to be able to provide insightful content as far as blogs or support articles, whether we're creating them or a third party's creating them that we've requested. That's the type of mix that we want to be able to see on our site, so that when people are coming to that site, they're getting those questions that they have answered so that they feel armed to be able to have that next step, better than just my only choice is to fill out a form or to engage with chat. And those things are great, but also let's give them what we know they're already probably asking for or looking for, and use the data to understand what that question is that we can answer.
So heading into the end of 2024, we're heading into Q4, which is the fastest quarter as far as time. It goes on like 1.2 if we're listening to it on an Audible. What is in store for, sounds like you've had a tremendous 2024, you're meeting expectations, and I know you both work a plan and have a plan. Anything on the horizon for 2025 you can share with us?
A referral source development is going to continue to be a focus. That is, I mean, the definition of success, especially in these markets, the smaller markets, depends on that. And when we've had any markets that have had sales director turnover or leadership turnover, it makes people hesitant to refer until they trust you again. So we rebuilding that in a few of our markets, and just becoming more consistent across every single one of our communities and having that high percentage of professional referrals. That's a big one for me. For the rest of 2025, I think a big focus is going to be on sales director onboarding and training in that initial 30, 60, 90, up to a year window when people are still learning their roles, and it can take a good year to learn it. And our data supports that. People that make it in that role a year are often very successful and stay for quite a while. It's just, how do we get people in that first year to feel the support that they need to stay?
Right.
And then third, we worked with you in the past on a sales playbook. I can't recommend that enough, but making sure that our team, my regional team, continues to refer back to that. They don't have to be the answer. We don't have to have different options or different recommendations based on who on the team you're talking to. I want it to be more consistent with using that sales playbook and really empowering our sales directors to use it to find their own answer, because it's in there. We just have to be consistent with the effort.
That kind of goes to that strong fundamental foundation, and then you can kind of go from there. I was talking to a regional the other day, just over the weekend, and kind of helping her, kind of doing some coaching and helping her kind of plan her coaching for her team. And it's not easy, right? But it's really simple as far as, okay, if this is the if this is the problem, or this is what you want to coach, what are and I kind of look, what are the 3 areas or the 4 areas? Now there's lots to drill down. The same with data. There's a finite number of like your main headers, right, of data points, or your main headers of what, your tour, inquiry to tour, lead to tour to move it. But it's that bubbling down from there, and you don't have to make it. If you've got that strong foundation and that playbook, like you said, and you've got such a strong foundation on the marketing side, you can kind of refer to the plan, tweak where necessary, but you don't have to make up new plays every time. And don't have to be fancy or think, well, isn't that what we've done? The fundamentals that are going to be the fundamentals forever in most cases, for the fundamentals. So I thank you for reminding me as well, and everyone else who's listening, that no one knows it all, and we're continue. That's, I think, one of the things people love so much about this business, and in sales in particular, and marketing. You're always learning, you're always developing, and your people serving people. And at Primrose, I was fortunate enough to just kind of chat with your president earlier today. As a matter of fact, it just, you can tell, his passion really is people, is the people make up Primrose, and they make up every company, and that, so your focus on helping to value and develop and onboard and continue. And I agree with you, Jessi, at least a year, and then on, you're feeling pretty good and pretty solid, and then you can really go to those advanced skills. Then you're really good to go. And one of your sales directors was on our webinar earlier this year of, hey, how are they doing it? How are they driving rate, not using aggregators, and keeping your building at 98, 99, 100%. And in the sales director from Primrose, I think she's been in her position 8 years, and did that passion she has for what she does and for Primrose it just comes out of her. But you've got someone 8 years who's, in a community sales position. That's not, I wish it was more typical. It's not. So kudos.
Yep. Courtney's amazing.
Courtney,
Yep.
It's commendable. It really is. And it kind of goes back to the culture, and it does start at the top, and how the two of you collaborate so strongly together. It really is an example, for your team. So thank you both so much for joining me on the Grow Your Occupancy podcast. Hope to see you soon in person, and continue learning from both of you. If you'd like to connect with either Brandon or Jessi, they both post really cool content on LinkedIn. I follow both, and a lot of book recommendations. Brandon writes a short little blog too on his post. I follow. You can find them both on LinkedIn, and you can follow us also, growyouroccupancy.com. Thank you again so much for listening. We'll talk to you again next time. I'm Julie Podewitz. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Julie.
This episode of the Grow Your Occupancy podcast is sponsored by Model 55. Model 55 provides turnkey model apartment and design solutions for senior living communities, combining quick nationwide service with deep expertise in creating model apartments. Model 55's designs are more than just aesthetically pleasing. They are strategically designed to drive occupancy and sales. From custom designs to ready-to-ship kits, Model 55 has solutions for any budget. For more information, www.model55.com. That's model55.com.